USA. She also worked as a postdoc in NTU, Singapore, and her interest is like currently she's working as a IP. Ups, formulation strategies, and
आवाज आ रही है? अभी तक
So as changing, I see the youngsters changing, the students are changing, the fact there's a whole ecosystem that's changing. Now, coming from a very university point of view, classically, I mean, if I look at, let's say, the mentions is because they started way earlier, being a developed nation way back, they could afford to do all of this, which we are seeing now in this country. Now, what typically happens in a setup like the US, is a very important role of academia. The research per se happens in background to help you decide on how to take your research. And that's when the protection comes in the form of IP. And then the next part of it is when you have an IP. So IP, as the name indicates, is a property right. So when you have a property, when you have a house, you can do whatever you want with the house. You can sell it to get money. You can rent it out for a period of time, which is what we call license. You can for a time period give it off to somebody, your brothers or sisters, and say, till this point of time, I assign the rights to you. You do whatever you want. So it is exactly like a property right, and that is why the only difference being this is not tangible and it emanates from your intellect. So basically, that is how this whole roadmap goes. The academia are the ones which come up with the core research, the basic research, which then gets translated with the help of the technology transfer office into the outside world, which is taken up by the industry. Now, as I said, that the students are moving towards different goals these days. So is the academia, so is the faculty, because now there are lots of ways by which a university can translate its inventions for its own revenues. There are faculty who have their own startups, which is supported by the institute partly, and the revenues they generate as part of the company feeds back into the university. So this is an ecosystem which is developing a lot all over India, and I've been a part of one such few technology transfer offices, and we can take up questions in that context later. Now, why is patents when tech research is very capital intensive? So you want something in return, and it takes about 8 to 10 years for before you can even launch your product. And also, we all know that the failure rates can be very high. If you think of the pharma industry, you can do years of research coming up with a molecule which you think is going to cure cancer, prostate cancer, toxicology results and your pharmacodynamics are so bad that you can't take the drug forward, right? So the risk of failure is also very high, and so the protection in the form of a patent becomes your only asset. So it is considered an asset, and when in the context of the startup, when people uh, go for raising investment, one of the things that is looked at very strongly is the asset before this. We are like, as India is moving towards this era, this has been the trend in other countries, especially in the US, for a long time now. And this graph pretty much shows how the number of startups has increased over time. Now, what is this lab to market journey? And from your academic point of view, what is it that you would do? So when you are working in a lab and you come up with some invention, you have to really think of what are the ideas, what are the results. You discuss with your mentor, and then you think of what is your discovery in the invention and what is the discovery and what is the invention. A discovery is a pathway which leads to activation of enough kappa B, which results in increase in growth of cells, which results in cancer. Now that's a discovery. You've discovered a particular pathway, particular molecules along the pathway. What is an invention? An invention is a molecule that you develop to stop a particular molecule in the pathway, which probably upregulates enough carbon, right? So then you have to move from the discovery mode to the invention mode to think of a product. And when you have a product, when you start developing a product, and that is one when you look at protecting your information. And that's when your technology transfer office comes in. They talk to you, you talk to them, and they tell you the best strategy to take this forward. So when we talk about strategy, the IP in itself, the patent strategy in itself is a world on its own. So the kind of patents you file, whether you want to file a provisional patent or a complete. Do you want to file first or do you want to publish first? The first question you want to ask, you want to see whether it's a competitive field and do you really want to raise the money in patents or whether you want to just publish it and then everybody take the benefit of your invention. Whether you are filing in India or in other countries as well. Do you have an industrial partner funding a franchise? there's always a problem on how much you can invest in things. So one of the things, and as such, that is one of the things Alpine advises. We advise that you do not just file a patent and wait for a patent grant before you get to the market. So at Alpine, our team, we are very focused on this. When an inventor comes to us with an invention, while the IP team is studying the inventions, and understanding on how to protect, there is a team which also ties up with industrial partners. So we are looking at industrial partners, and if a partner is interested in your product, they may actually fund the cost of the patenting, further development. So these are strategies that you need to come up with if you want to realize the value of your invention. So we also insist that an industrial partner is a key because an industrial partner needs academia and the academia needs industrial partners. Um, and let's say that your patent is your invention is already there are a lot of similar inventions around you. You can always think of designing around, modifying a few things here and there, changing the if you're cloning, if there's a particular vector you are trying to make, you can modify a few restriction sites. You can do something that brings a novelty to your invention. And finally, when you file your IP, also there are a lot of processes involved therein, which countries you want to file, decisions on whether you want to continue in terms of how much money you have, which applications you want to keep, which countries you want to keep them in, and so on. Now, coming from an academic setup, I'll just tell you a story. I'll stop here if you want to ask any questions before I go to the next section. Okay, I take that for a no. Now, coming from, I just thought I will just give you a story of how everywhere we start small, right? So India, we are starting small. We are new to this. Now, a similar thing happened way back in 1980 in US, wherein there was a legislation called the Bayh-Dole Act, which was introduced. Now, one of the reasons why the country introduced this act was to promote inventions from academia. Um, so the whole concept of academia working in isolation and industries working in isolation was not bringing in the depth. And this was the same time the software growth had started, and so the Silicon Valley as well. So the biotech industry also felt that it is biotech as in general, the industry, it was very important that there is this link, there is this connection. And so the Bayh-Dole Act was enacted, which said that the recipients, basically those doing research in universities of federal funds and those who receive funds from outside in the US, mostly the NI actually, could patent their inventions and license them on their own. They are not liable to their granting agencies for anything. Now, this was very landmark legislation because it facilitated the transfer of ownership. So now the universities became the owner of the research results and not the funding agency. So the universities were able to make use of the inventions the way they wanted, license to whoever they want, tie up with any kind of people they want. And this paved way for a systematic patenting and setting up of what is called the technology transfer. Now, in return, what happened? There was a lot of revenue creation. There were royalties which came through, and maybe you touch upon what are royalties in one of the next talk. Incentives from inventors, which I mean, to commercialize inventions, and this also boosted research and spurred innovation. Now, all of you have heard of recombinant DNA technology. So the birth was in 1973, and great people who were the uh, the actors in getting this technology, Stanley Cohen and Herbert Boyer. Now these two scientists were working in their respective institutes. Herbert Boyer was at UCSF and Stanley Cohen was at Stanford University. And they had both developed, one had developed restriction enzymes and the other had developed the method of cloning that an antibiotic carrying bacteria and isolating and cloning genes. Right? So it's sometime when they met for a conference, they had exchanged their ideas, and then there was this breakthrough. They just decided to collaborate, came together, and this was the birth of recombinant DNA technology. It was big for the research community. It was huge. It was huge. The implications of it. So Stanley and Herbert Boyer, like any other scientist, very excited. And what did they do? They went and published in Nature, right? Now, when they spoke to the technology transfer office, the technology transfer office said, wow, this is going to have huge ramifications, not only for now, but for future as well. And so it is very important that we file a patent. So the technology transfer office took it on themselves and they filed a patent for this invention, which was in 1974. Now, by the end of 2001, what had happened was these two universities together, they started licensing out their innovation. And I think in the next talk, we'll touch upon licensing. But in simple terms, as I told you, patent is a property right. So I can give my house, part of my house, if I have a two-play accommodation, I can give one part of my house to one family and the second part of the house to the second family. And so I get revenues from both the families. Again, if I want, I can give it to four students, I can give it to five students, right? So I will, but because the property belongs to me. So when I give to many people, I call that non-exclusive because each member who's living in this house has non-exclusivity. They can use certain parts of the house, except they have exclusivity in some things. They have exclusivity in their room, which nobody else can enter, but certain areas of. So when you give to many, so that's what these two scientists did. So the technology transfer office developed a licensing methodology, and they give non-exclusive licenses to many companies. And because recombinant DNA was so powerful, which can be used to develop any kind of product, the two universities together made $25 million just in licensing revenues. So when I rent out my house, when I give a room to somebody, I also take back something. So for the right I have given that person, I am entitled to certain revenues. And that's the same with the patent. So for using the invention, which is protected under the patent, the taker the license has to give something. And if you look at the numbers here, the license of recombinant DNA technology was granted to about 468 companies. And at that time, when this was granted, big names like Amgen, Lilly, Genentech, Merck, these were all very small startup companies. And Genentech, incidentally, was also founded by Boyle. Genentech is a huge company. And how many products do you think came out of this one technology? It was a whopping number of 2,442. And if you can look back at literature, you can say that medicines for heart disease, I mean, the biologics we talk about today, biosimilars, there's so much of talk about all of these. These were all developed based on recombinant DNA technology, the medicines for heart disease, anemia, HIV, AIDS, diabetes, you name it. And the life of a patent, um, unlike a house, I mean, what difference is my house? I have it forever till it's broken down, till I sell it to somebody. However, the patents, there is a limit on the years of protection. Patents are protected for 20 years, and so the lifetime of a patent is 20 years, and in the 20 years you can exploit the invention free once you have a monopoly. After 20 years, it becomes to the public domain and everybody starts to exploit it. Now, this is a huge implication in India, wherein if you look at the pharma world, prior to 2005, India went into a patent amendment. Now, just to touch on the reason being, prior to 2005, we did not allow patents on products. So for instance, we we did not allow patent on paracetamol. But two companies or two different people could have a patent on the process of making paracetamol. So we could have process patents, but we could not have product patents. Now this changed when we complied with what is called the trade-related aspects in intellectual property rights. When we complied with it worldwide, and we said that we would start granting product patents. Now, prior to 2005, we were only a generic industry. We were just making copycat versions of medicines because each company would come up with a new process of making the same medicine. However, post 2005, there has been almost 20 years from now, then we seen a gradual increase in the number of product patents that are coming up, number of companies that are coming up, because product patents gave way for more innovation, more technologies, and more interest in coming up with and more interest of other countries in filing in India, where India was seen as a market, as an innovative market, and a market with coming up with newer ideas rather than copycat version. So this was a huge change that came up in our patent regime. So when I said that commercial recombinant DNA product generated in the life of the patent, I meant that during the 20-year time period, this recombinant DNA technology brought about close to 35 billions of sales in revenue in forms of now, although so this is where India is going towards technology transfer of business because the scientists have a mandate. Their job is to invent, develop newer products. And so they cannot be burdened with this whole issue of licensing, connecting with people, finding licensing partners, setting up, negotiating deals, who to license to. So that is why there are now most USIR institutes I think have technology transfer offices as well. So the technology transfer offices come up with a strategy, and in the story of Owen Moore, there was a person called Ray Morse um, was from a legal managerial background, and he was the person who decided how he wanted to license. Now, he said that this is a platform technology which can give birth to many products, and so we cannot focus it to one person. We cannot give it to one person. So he offered to many companies, and they also offered a very low licensing fees and royalty rates to smaller startup companies, and which we call the fledgling firms. Now, the research institutions, as because they wanted to experiment, come up with more and more innovation, they were given the research use exemption in the sense that they were not liable to pay anything, or by use of this particular technology, they were not at a risk of infringing their patents. So they had were given this exemption, and they also let the derivative product, like let's say I have a vector to produce insulin. As a company, I'm making insulin, but if I can modify the vector and change a few sites here and there to add the promoter of this insulin or do something different, then they were also given this incentive that they can commercialize their derivative products on their own. So they could file a patent on their own. And so this created innovation system, industry collaborations, and researchers got more and more, got newer and newer ideas. And interestingly, the Bayh-Dole Act also had a sharing of the royalty income, which by which the technology transfer office would receive 15% of the revenues, and the remaining 85% was divided between the inventor, whoever was the inventor, like in this case it was Owen employer, the inventor's department got a share of it, and the inventor's school or faculty got a share of it. And it is now interesting to see that this whole ecosystem that was developed way back in 1980s continues to be one of the income generating mechanisms in many universities. And interestingly, again, most of their revenues come from biomedical discoveries and not really from physical sciences and technology. Now, for instance, the bulk of New York University's licenses the old data, and I put it in here only because Remington is known to all of us, and it was one of the very, very, very big blockbusters. The monoclonal antibody against which cancer, but I think lymphoma and some forms of breast cancer, came from New York University, and just the royalty interest of this monoclonal antibody generated $650 million. Although this is old data, this was very exciting when this happened because this was one of the universities which made tons of licensing revenue because this monoclonal antibody became a huge blockbuster. So although the lesson learned here is that although filing of patents and interaction with industry is really important, however, everybody has to be aware that not every patent is going to generate you money, right? Only 10% of the patented inventions will actually generate income. 60 to 70% will bring in nothing, and the remaining will break even. So this is exactly why it is very important to constantly strategize, and as you go, you don't have to retain all your patents for 20 years. As a university, we as educating students exercise very often, wherein universities come to us and say that we have 200 patents and we have been paying maintenance fees for a long time, and now I think we are just and nothing has happened with this patent. We've been paying maintenance fees, and it's already 10 years and nothing has happened. So these are the strategy. We do this UDP exercise and we see if there is a licensing potential. Is there a potential to generate any revenue? Is there a potential to come up with a startup? Are there any potential here? And if not, we recommend that you do not pursue spending any more money. So that's one thing that is also has to be kept. Now, I just thought that is interest you. We saw the technology of recombinant DNA technology, which was a platform technology, at which the university decided to give it up as a free, non-exclusive license. Now, this is anybody identifies who this person is? Well, I guess you are all on mute. I can't hear you well. This is hello.
Yeah, we can. Yes, audible. Yeah, we can.
I just got a little worked up. That I just got a little worried that in case no, I'm just talking and nobody's hearing.
No, no,
Yeah.
no, no. Everyone is listening. Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
keep
Yeah.
going. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So this is Carrie Lewis, and Carrie Lewis, as you know, got the Nobel Prize for discovering obesity, right? And interestingly, what had happened was it was in 1969 that Thomas Brock and Hensel had isolated this organism called this pathogen from this bacteria called Thermus aquaticus from the hot spring in Yellowstone National Park. And as you know, what is used in workplace, and now there are better forms of cat proteins. There are other versions of it taken from other bacteria. But at that time, when PCA was discovered, they discovered that this particular bacteria, because it could withstand such high temperature, there is a mechanism in there which allows them to do that. And so the they had isolated the RNA DNA polymerase from the toxic particles, as you know, and which is what is used in the PCR. And at that point, although it was an interesting discovery, the people who had they just submitted. So ATCC is American Type Culture Collection, and so they found this as a very exciting piece of work. And what they did was they deposited this this bacteria, a culture of this bacteria at ATCC. Now, when Harry Mullis and the company where he was working at, which is called the Cetus Corporation, when he was working there, he realized that you need something more. So there was this, they were trying to replicate, they were trying to make cycles of DNA, replications of DNA in cycles. And that's when they realized that there is something that they could do, and they went and bought this terms and qualification, $35 from ATCC. Now, by 1990, all components needed to perform PLC-PCR were known to the scientific community. Watson and Crick had already shown that DNA polymerase was required to extend the oligonucleotide fragments. And so everything was put together, not to undermine, not to give, of course, it was a great discovery, it was a great invention, but many of the things were known. And what it took for the team, Carrie Miller's and the team, was to put all these things together in a way that they could make the PCR happen, right? And Carrie Miller's got a Nobel Prize for this discovery. Now, again, when I was just touching upon the how this thing happens, I just wanted to tell you that the revenue from the life sciences sector has only gone up over the years, and life sciences continues to be of the country. This is the 2015 data. However, still it continues to generate a lot of revenues in terms of its issues. Now, I have been talking about intellectual property. I have been talking about patent in general. But when you talk about a product, when you talk about, let's say, even a drug, a molecule that we are talking about, a recombinant developed by the company and technology, let's say insulin. Now, although we talk about that as a patent, when you go to the market, when you go to commercialize it, you need a lot of ways. There are various intellectual property rights that come in picture when you go to the market. Now, you want people to identify your product by a particular name, a logo, a trademark. So when you go to the market, although your invention you're already protected under the patent, which is the technical part of it, everything that has technology involved, you protect it by a patent, and then you also file for a trademark, wherein you give your brand name. You call it LPU itself, right? And you have a trade name on it, and you also may have a logo, right? So that is a registered trademark, and this is a very important piece because you want your customers to associate your product with that logo. Now, if you think back on how you have you're driving on a highway and you see blue and yellow stripes, you know that you are approaching a petrol pump, right? You see, you see a tagline, have a break. What is it? Kit Kat, right? So there are taglines. So this helps you in customer association. So trademarks are the other kind of intellectual property rights. Now there is a right called registered designs. Now the registered designs are a kind which are for a particular design. You can protect your design under the intellectual, which is also an internet IP. Like for instance, so one of the things is design is just the aesthetics. Okay, the working of the product should not be dictated by the designers. Now, if you look at this product, which has all the intellectual property rights embodied into it, it has a patent on the hardware and the software components. It has its own trademark, which is touch or thumb drive, and the design. Design is the shape. So the inventor, for whatever reason, they would have wanted to keep it in this design, right? And there is copyrights. Copyrights is on whatever you reduce the material form. Either it is in the form of a software, or you have written it in form of manuals, all these are under copyright. These, for instance, the lecture, if any of you is recording a lecture today, this recorded component is my copyright, right? And to reproduce this lecture anywhere, you may have to take my permission because now by having reduced it to material form, having recorded it, it has become my property. So copyright doesn't need any form of registration. Okay. Or if one of you is writing notes on this lecture, right? So you have your own way of writing your notes. You have your way of putting your punctuations and different aspects, you taking the notes of important things. Now this, you have used your skill and labor in putting my entire talk together in a format that you can understand better. Now this becomes your own copy. That's not my copyright because I have only you have decided which parts of this talk are important and which is what you want to reproduce, which are the top parts of the where you would like comma, where you would like summaries. You have used your skill, judgment, and labor, and so you become the copyright holder of your piece. Now, what exactly, coming back to the patents, what exactly are patents? These are legal rights which are granted for scientific and technical knowledge. Okay, so there has to be scientific and technical knowledge. And this is very interesting because that is the only reason why everybody who practices in patent has a basic science degree. You cannot practice in the patent area. I mean, as in the hardcore aspects of it, not the legal, just the hardcore like drafting, understanding patent. You need to have a science degree. And as I said, it is granted, it is a privileged property granted by a country which is for 20 years. And because it's a property right, just like I said, that you can exert the rights of your house, your property that you have in India. You can say that nobody. So you can only exert the rights by living here on the property that is here, right? Same way, your property, your intellectual property is valid only in the place where it is registered. So if you don't marks, everything, if you file it in India, but you do not file it in the US, anybody in the US can make your use of it. Okay, so it is valid only in the country where it is there. And as I said, because it's a property right, it can be bought, sold, and used to attract. So what does it give you? It gives you this exclusive right, and it hinders everybody who has not contributed to the development of the invention for copying and marketing. Using it, selling, manufacturing your product that is protected under the law. Now the reason being, the premise is that he who did not contribute should also not contribute. I don't know. I can stop here and take questions, and then I can go to the next part. Can we pause here? Because if I keep talking, chances are that the students and others might just
Yeah, sure.
knowledge.
It's fine. Students, if anyone have any question, he or she can ask. And feel free, this is more towards interactive session rather than, it's kind of lecture. So if anyone have question, please ask.
So I'm looking at the chat box. So of you on post. If you don't ask questions, then I can't move on. Then I feel that you have not understood or you haven't listened to what I'm saying. I see there are 62 participants here. What is MIT third year? ML, medical lab technician. Is that MLT?
Yeah.
Anybody? Okay, no question. Okay, I hope that you will ask me questions because this, I mean, so one thing about the law is there's no right or wrong, right? Everything is a gray law. It's maybe what right or maybe wrong, right? So feel free to ask questions because if you don't ask questions, then it's, I mean, just feel free. You may have some thoughts in your mind. How many of you think that you want to pursue this field? So you can ask me questions on how to pursue this. Anybody among you?
How to pursue, ma'am? Can you just repeat it?
Sorry?
How to enter and how to pursue this? Can you give some idea?
To start with, you have to ask questions, right? So good, you're asking. So, yeah, to pursue this, you have to. So there are a couple of courses available for IP. There are various institutes that allow you to do distance learning courses. But one of the things with the legal world, with the even in IP, is that it's not enough for you to do just like when you do your research, right? When you're studying here, you need to do practicals because you need to understand at the lab level whatever you're studying in the textbook. So if you're studying about cloning, till you really do cloning, you will not understand what are the problems that come up, right? And once you know the problems, you troubleshoot. So there are companies that let you do internships, summer internships or longer internships after MSc. Obviously, I don't know whether they take BScs, but yeah, after MScs, definitely they do let you intern with them, so you can learn on the job on how to read a patent document, how to write a patent document, how to look for prior art, look for what is already there, how to look at the websites of patents. So all these things you can only learn on the job. No course will be able to teach you. However, the aspects of patenting, what are the laws? For instance, the Indian Patent Act follows the statute, right? Um, on the act per se. So you'll be able to understand the law when you do a course. So that's one thing. Also, for MSc graduates, there is just like when you submit a paper for publication, the process is that it goes through review, right? So there are few reviewers, let's say three reviewers who review your publication, and they come back to you with questions. Sometimes they say, yeah, it's fine and we are ready to accept it, and sometimes they say that we would like you to do these experiments one, two, three. Maybe this needs to be shown in a better way, or you've used this dye. Maybe you should not have used this. Why don't you do instead of flow cytometry? Can you show any fluorescence? So these kind of questions they come up with, and then you have to address them before your work can be published. Now, similarly, the patent also goes through a process. So when you file a patent, it is examined by the patent examiners. Now, the examiners draw up they draw up so basically there are three very important aspects for a patent to be granted. The patent has to be novel, it has to be inventive, and it should have some industrial application. Now each of this has a meaning within the Patent Act, and we can touch on it if we have time and if somebody's interested, or sometime in the follow-up sessions. I can't go too deep into it because it's completely a subject on its own. So basically what I was telling was the patent examiner comes up with objections and asks you for clarifications on certain aspects, right? Now this is again the place where the MSc graduates are very routinely hired. The Patent Office of India, which is in Delhi, Calcutta, Bombay, and Chennai, they conduct this exam every year and they select patent examiners, and then they train you in the office, and then you will be in charge of examining the patent submitted by somebody. So these are the two sides of it. One side is you yourself are working on the patent, and third is obviously that the technology transfer office is coming up. You could be a part of the technology transfer office managing the patent portfolio of a particular university.
Kripra, can I ask you one thing?
Sure.
Like say for example, someone have a patent, right? like say
Correct.
a drug molecule and a combination, like existing drug molecule and some natural molecule. They just make a, some kind of a combination. And
Okay.
somebody patent, how much modification need to be made so that another patent can be granted by another person. You understand my point?
Yeah. So
Like say we,
modification per se are so per se. So okay. So I need to go back. I didn't come. So do we have time or should
yeah, yeah,
I?
sure, yes, 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 we have, yes, we have time.
Okay. So, now, just to quickly touch on your question, so basically, when we amended our act in 2005, our Patent Act,
Hmm.
we got in a section called Section 3, according to which the modifications of a known substance is not allowed, right?
Okay.
But however, as you have suggested, so the modification you're talking about is a combination
Hmm.
wherein you have brought in a new compound and let's say synergistically they bring in an effect which has a better efficacy. So I don't know how many of you have followed the case of Novartis. Novartis had patent on Cleveland, the lung cancer molecule.
Hmm.
So in countries like US and Canada, they had got the patent. But India, because of its Section 3, so India held that what India said was this is patent evergreening. You are not allowing newer innovations to come through by just modifying. So they had just modified a salt form from of the original molecule that they had, and then they modified it to call it. They just changed it as a beta crystalline form, and they called it Cleveland. Now, India ruled that because you've just made a small modification, the only thing a drug has to pass, even to be graded as a, you have to show therapeutic efficacy. They showed it had better bioavailability and everything. So this court went to Supreme Court, and the judgment was that a mere modification without showing enhanced efficacy cannot be given an infringement. However, as you said, as you suggested, in supposing by mixing in a normal combination, you can show that there is an enhanced efficacy and that combination by itself was not known, was not obvious to some people. I mean, you said like a natural product. Let's say I take paracetamol and I mix it with let's say ginger. Now this was not something anybody could know. It's not an obvious to everybody, and by doing so, I bring about an enhanced efficacy. So that is it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Okay, I just thought, yeah, if we have time, I can take you through another story just to tell you how this whole thing was. This is just a very small story, and all of you, I mean, you're
Yeah,
all
yeah.
students.
Keep going. Yeah, it's fine.
All of you are students. Of course, those of us who are not students, we've all seen the sipper cup. Okay? The sipper cup is kind of a, when a child, when a baby graduates from drinking from a feeding bottle to drinking from glass, there is in between something called trainer cup. Now, this is a story of a trainer cup, and this is the lady called Maggie Haberman who had nothing to do with science, who had a graphic degree, she was in design, and she worked in something like adult literacy. Now, when she had a baby, the baby suffered from some feeding problems and so could not suck from a bottle. So she went and tried to buy these zipper cups. Now, when she went to buy the zipper cups, she saw that one problem remained. The problem was that these zipper cups leaked a lot. So when you turn them upside down and you don't turn them, you leave it on the sofa, you leave it somewhere, it just leaks. And so it makes the house really messy. So she was very intrigued and she needed this product, and so she decided that she's going to develop a new bottle of her own, which she called the Haberman. Now, before you embark on any problem, before you start making a product, right, you have to understand what the problem is. And if this is a problem that is faced by many people, yes, she had a problem. But is this a problem that every faced? Did every parent want to have a sipper cup? So she went and spoke to a lot of people. And many people said, yes, this was a problem because when we we are trying to transition our children, trying to feed the baby with milk, and most of the time it leaks. So she decided that I need to come up with a solution. And my solution should be that if I turn this cup upside down and shake it vigorously for many seconds, it should not spill. And even if it is left upside down overnight, because you can't tell the baby, right? You can't tell the baby to switch off or close the lid. So even if it is left upside down overnight, it should not spill, right? Now, this was so she said, okay, first and foremost, let me understand what is there in the market. So, what is the first thing she did was she went and checked the available products and she saw that there were cups that simply leaked and there were cups which said on and off, right? A child doesn't know which side is on and which side is off many times. We don't know. And only after it's leaked, we know that okay, we had actually put it on. Okay, and then there are these covers, you can snap them, you can cover them, but none of them really serve the purpose. Higher art search. When you come up with some kind of an invention, you submit what is called the invention disclosure or the publication that you have written up, you write and give it to the technology transfer office. And this is what we as Edufans also do. We look at the invention and we tell what is already existing, what is existing in the product, patent, what is existing in the market, and we tell you where you stand. Is it even worthwhile to go forward with this and spend all the money in your research and development? So they got to, they went through other patents. Now, one of the very simple things that Maggie did was, if you've seen the feeding bottles have nothing. They just have this teeth with just slit walls. They just have slit walls which are just cross slits. And even if you leave them upside down, they don't eat. So the way the child gets milk into it is by suction pressure. And it is said that kids have babies have very high suction capacity. So it's like a vacuum cleaner. So that is the concept by which the milk doesn't spill, but the milk gets into the child. So she replicated the same thing onto these trainer cups. And then she developed a prototype. So when you come up with some invention, not in so much in the biomedical field, but in all other devices field, for instance, you have to develop a prototype. And when you develop a prototype, you test the prototype. And when she developed her prototype, she saw that the patents did not split. And so she filed a patent with the rubber split wall, and she called this 80-day update. So now this is the trademark. Okay? And so the way you write the patent, you write claims and all that is a long process. But that's what she did. She basically patented it. Okay, and these are some of the sites where you can do prior art searches. Okay? So first and foremost thing you look when you do a prior art search is you see whether your invention is novel. Now when you say novelty, now there are, as I said, there are three parameters for a patent to be granted: novelty, inventive step, and industrial application. The novelty is if your product, let's say the drug that Dr. Sandeep spoke about, is not there anywhere else in the market or nobody else or in any publication or in any other patent anywhere in this world, then it is novel. Right? So novelty is very simple. It should not have been reported by anybody anywhere or be in the market anywhere. Now, when we said modification, right, that's where the question of inventive step comes. Now, inventive step is one place where we always have objections because science is inventive. Now, inventive step focuses on this feature. It says that yes, your product may be novel, but unless and until it involves a technical advance compared to what is already known. So, if I say by just giving a particular drug in 3 days, whereas if I give the combination drug, I can cure the disease in 1 day. That is a technical advance because the society wants something and it is of economical significance. And such a combination was not obvious to the person skilled in the art. So this combination, you are a person skilled in the art, I am a person skilled in the art. For me, it should not have been obvious. So if I'm talking about curing fever, which also causes body pain, and it is a very obvious thing for me to combine a fever reducer with a painkiller. That's an obvious thing. Whereas if I combine it with something unrelated, I combine paracetamol with, let's say, a product which brings down inflammation in some way or form. I'm just giving you a random example, which was not obvious. It was just a random thought that came to my mind, and I tried it and it worked. Then it is said to be inventive. And again, if it is the technical practice, right? So when I said technical advance, in the case of Mandy, it was so. So just to complete the story, so basically we have an industrial application is very simple. It can be used in an industry. So basically, when you have a product, what do? You go for licensing. You go and ask people if they want to, because she is a person sitting at home. She doesn't have the capacity to go and sell her product or mass manufacture it. So she needs a company to mass manufacture it for her. And when she went and asked for licenses from many companies, the companies did not want to give because nobody trusted her. And people said that, oh, it doesn't look beautiful, kids like colors, and this doesn't look aesthetic. And so there was only one company which gave her the support, which is now the biggest producer of all these zipper cups, which I think and everybody was making it. But at that time, only first years was making it. And so she went and licensed it, and she mass manufactured it. And by 1996, remember, she filed a patent in 1992. By March 1996, she had sold 2 million cups, and there was no advertising expenditure because hers was a very very powerful product. Okay, and she knew which market to target. She went to only crashes, and she went to nursery schools, and she marketed her product. So she hardly spent any money, but her revenue was good. So that was, but however, when the product becomes a success, what is the next thing that happens? The next thing that happens is somebody else starts making your product. And so it is like when you have your house, you have built your house, you have made it, you beautified it, and your neighbor starts coming and living in that house, right? And starts utilizing all the advantages of your house. That neighbor of yours is infringing your territory. The same way, an intellectual property, which is your territory, when somebody else starts making it, and so your profits, they are actually infringing. So you can actually take them to court. Okay, and so in this case also, there was another company called Jackal. Now the Jackal company knew about Mandy's invention because Mandy had gone and asked them for license, and they had understood what the invention was, and later on they came up with their own. So this went into litigation. Now that's a huge area on its own, and eventually Haberman won because one of the things that the other company argued was that this was a very simple thing. There was no technical advance. There's nothing inventive about it. There has been zipper cups in the world all over, and there has been feeding bottles. She just combined two things together and came up with a new invention. So because it is not anything new, it is not worthy of a patent. But finally, the judgment was given, which said that though she had taken a very small and simple step, it appears to be a step which not many people in the trade have done in many years. It has been a problem for 10 years. 10 years is a long time. And nobody had thought of this solution. And if the solution was that obvious, why did not some other company come up with it? So finally, Mandy said that because I had the patent, I could go to court, defend my idea, enforce my patent. This made me a lot of money, and I, if I didn't have these patents, I would not have them, right? So that's where the importance of patents comes in. Yeah. So I don't think I'll go through all this some other time. I have the time to. I'll talk to you more. And with this, I think I close my session and please feel free to ask.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kripa. Thank you very much. Students, if you have questions, ask. And even those faculty members, my colleagues, can ask if they have.
Yeah, please. Okay, you can write to me. I think, Dr. Sandeep, you have my email ID, so in
Yes,
case
yes.
anybody wants to write to me, would you write?
Yeah, definitely. Because sometimes, students may be shy a little bit about that, whether
Oh,
they ask. Yeah, they may think that they may ask the right question or wrong, knowing that fact that question can never be wrong, right? Question is a question. Yeah.
Question is a question. No, and the most, I think the other problem is with this online mode, I mean, there's so one-on-one interaction.
I think, Kripa, there is one question you can read in the chat box, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Our trade secret and patent related to each other. I mean, if a company tries to keep recipe as trade secret, can it apply for a patent request for the disclosure of the recipe? Yeah, so this is a very valid point. Actually, trade secrets also come as it comes under intellectual property rights, but the very name trade secret you don't want to disclose. So most companies choose between trade secret and patent. So if you want to keep something a trade secret, you do not patent. Because patent is like publication. 18 months from the time you publish, you file your patent, it is published on the website. So then it's no longer a trade secret, right? And patent also has this that you have to disclose everything. Basically, you have to disclose everything, just like your publication. If I take your publication and I want to repeat the experiment, I should be able to do so. In the same line, a patent has the same requirement. If you take my patent, you should be able to work my invention. So if I want to do that, then I can't do it. So basically, in the software world, in the case of most people prefer to keep their algorithms and the software components of their products.
Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, if not, so let me ask. I think if we can able to shift to another speaker, give me like a minute or so.
Okay, to give them like a few minutes break because this is
Yeah, yes, that's what I'm thinking of. That's what I'm thinking of. Then we get refreshed. So take a bio break for like a couple of minutes, and then we will rejoin, like say at 5 minutes from now, right? 3:10 we will join, right?
So the next speaker will take on from where I left, and basically you have how do you enter one? So you have an invention, how do you do it? So would it be very interesting to see that the process going forward?
Dr. Kripa, thank you very much. That is a short note. You just bring on whatever our students want, but definitely it will benefit them. Right now, if they don't realize that, but later on they definitely, because this is a part where we all biologists like in looking forward, right?
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you very much.
I can leave the meeting. Or
It's up to you. It's up to you. If you want to listen, Saurabh, you're most welcome. No problem whatsoever. Okay, so students just come, we take like a quick break for a couple of minutes and then just join back like the same kind that she left is going to join that, right? Or extend from there how a product that you sell it to the market, that is entrepreneurship, or if you have something after IPR, how you can make your own industry, your own product by which people should know you, right? So just come back and see you after like. In the meantime, let me ask the expert to put the slide in front, right? Yes, ये
नाम बताएंगे सर? राइट तो होगी सर, इसमें से राइट हमने किसी को लिया ही नहीं है। हाँ हाँ हाँ
Okay, I think enough time is given. Okay, so students, we have another speaker among us, Mr. Saurabh Gargav, right? He's also the co-founder and MD of this Educate Applied Solutions, right? So 20 years of experience in facilitating different technologies and IP, these commercializations. When you look at the R&D experience, he worked with the Ministry of Science and Technology. He worked with Ministries of Science and Technology where they just trained persons for many time, like for many years, right? How to excel in terms of developing technologies, right? He has I think he has interacted with the scientists and researchers who have a greater than like hundreds of R&D organizations in India and abroad, right? He is basically the person who make your product, right, to a bigger heights where you can see that what efforts he can put in your this product, how it is going to be excel in the market, right? Saurabh brings, it's basically, if you can try, it's a true technocrat, right? In technology, how you can say commercialize your technology, what are the legal aspects, what would be the managerial experience you required or expertise required to run an R&D or to drive a business, right? How you can drive your industry, your academia. So he remains a head of for many organizations before he put his own, this startup, right, as a co-founder of Educans, right. Saurabh was working as a group member of National Mission for Interdisciplinary Cyber Physical System with the Department of Science and Technology to the Government of India, right. A large mission with the total budget of like around 3,600 crores for 5 years, where he worked as a how the techno innovation, can be enhanced and commercialization of these processes, right. So we welcome Saurabh uh, in a virtual session on behalf of LPU. I welcome Saurabh, and now over to Saurabh to start his presentation. Saurabh, am I audible to you?
Yes, you are. Am I audible to others?
Yes, I hope so. Yeah,
Okay.
it's perfectly audible.
Great, great. Thank you, Sandeep, for the kind words you have used for me, and thanks all of you for having me for this talk. Um, I was sitting through the earlier presentation. First of all, is my slide visible to everybody?
No, no, not yet.
Oh, I'm having the message that I'm sharing my screen.
You have to scroll it, bring it to your PowerPoint.
Now I've stopped presenting. No, I'm getting a message saying sorry, an error occurred when screen sharing.
Just hold a minute. Let me check.
Uh, Sandeep, is it possible that I'll email my presentation to you and you will pull it up there?
Yes, yes, sure, sure. Do it. Yeah. Okay, I will do that.
The only problem with that is I will have to depend on you to run the
Sure,
site.
sure. No need to worry about that.
1 second.
हमने तो किसी को राइट किया नहीं।
So let me know when you drop an email to me, right? I'm just checking my emails. I didn't find till yet.
So Sandeep, actually I shared it with Dr. Kripa.
It's fine, it's fine.
She
Yeah,
can
it's fine.
Yeah. In our internal email, it is much easier for me to share the file.
Yeah, yeah, it's fine. No worries. You're all okay.
Yeah, Kripa, can you pull the slides, please?
Just give me a minute. I don't think it's come yet. Ayani.
I don't know why it is not going.
It's not
So,
gone
just-
at all?
Just try once more, like by sharing screen, maybe possible.
It is giving me the message saying can't share your screen. Sorry, an error occurred when screen sharing.
So you do one thing. You just leave one for a minute and rejoin. Let's see then.
Okay, fine. I'll do it.
अभी में नहीं आ रहा हाँ तो क्या
Hi Sandeep, can you see the
Yeah,
slide?
go to full screen. Yeah, it's perfectly visible.
Okay, fine. So thanks Sandeep, and I thank once again to you and to all of the people who are there for having me for this discussion. I was sitting through the earlier presentations. I thought that I will begin my presentation with the question itself, rather than trying to work out the other way around, wherein I talk about few things and then try to gauge is there any interest among the people or not. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's fine. Keep going. Yeah. Let's see how students reacted to your queries and your lecture. That truly depending upon them. But yes,
And our job is to just keep trying with the different methods. Let's see which one will work, which will not.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, keep going.
Next. Okay, so let me just try to build a context first. We hear these words, entrepreneurs, startups, in the context of India, in the context of the global scenario as well. These are just some of the facts to get your attention, to get you hooked up on this topic. It says that recently India has surpassed the United Kingdom and become the third largest startup ecosystem in the world after the US and China. Amazing, right? It says that a record 44 Indian startups achieved unicorn status in 2021 alone, taking the overall tally of startup unicorns in India to 83. India has over about 61,400 startups. When I'm saying startups, recognized by the DTI. In 2022 alone, we had about 14,000 startups recognized, 33 in 2016 and 17. India, among the Indian districts, about like 555 districts had at least one new startup. So these are some of the facts which might get your attention, which might fascinate you. If you will see the number of startups which have been incorporated in the space sector alone, we all say that if something is very tough and very complex, we say, is it a rocket science or what? In the area of rocket science, or if I'll put it broader in a broader sense, in the space sector itself, in 2012, we had only one startup, which has gradually increased by 2020, 2021 to about like close to 60 odd startups. This is a huge jump. In 2019, we had only 11 startups which were operating, which are operating in the space sector. In 2021 alone, 47 startups have been involved. In 2022 alone, we have about like 43 unicorns, right? So these are just some of the facts, just to build the context, and from here we will take it forward. Kripa, can you just move it to the next slide? Do you know some of these companies? The poster boy of Indian startup Flipkart, I'm sure all of you are aware about. You know Danzo, you know Baiju, you know Ola, you know Bharat Biotech, you know Grow, you know Go Mechanics. I'm sure you have heard about them in some context or other, right? This is the subject we are talking about today. That what does it mean to have a startup? What does it mean to be an entrepreneur? What is the path? What is the kind of challenge? What other people have done? What is the precedent or the history which tells us about this entire subject of entrepreneurship, and what other people are doing in this space? Yeah. Next, please. Before we will go and try to understand this area, I just want to decode these words as to what do I understand out of these words and what you understand out of these words. And these are not the words which are very technical. I'm sure each one of you might have heard this word in these words in some context or other. I just want to ask few of you as to what do you understand when I say entrepreneur, and you need to answer. And as Kripa said, as Sandeep said, there is nothing wrong, there is nothing right here. It is just about the perception. What comes to your mind when I say or when you hear the word entrepreneur?
A person who starts his own business.
Okay, Garima, just a follow-up question. Can I ask on what you responded, Garima? Can I
Or you
ask?
can ask. Yeah, you can
Okay.
ask counter. No
So she
problem.
said what she responded is partially right and partially wrong. It is right because she talked about his or her own business. But my question is, if at all, I will open up a new laundry shop in the next lane. Am I an entrepreneur? Or if I will start a grocery shop in the next colony, am I an entrepreneur?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what is the difference between, let's say, Flipkart and the person who is selling the multiple brands through his grocery shop? Okay, let me ask this question in other way. What is the difference between an entrepreneur and a businessman? Why do we have this different word, this fancy word called entrepreneur? Why can't we use the same word which we have been using for hundreds of years called businessman or businesswoman?
Has an idea and want to earn money from it.
The laundry shop fellow also earns money out of it. He also has an idea. Is he an
Uh,
entrepreneur?
uh, it's not an idea. He's just generating money from the same kind of business, you can say. But it's not a new idea.
Oh, okay, okay. So you got it. So buzzword here is the new idea, right? But
Yes.
if I have a new idea, am I an entrepreneur?
Not exactly. Everyone has a new idea,
Yeah, better sir.
but anyone who could generate money from it, or who has an idea to generate money from it, I think.
Anyways, that's good.
Yeah, you're more or less there. So if I'm a self-employed person, why can't I call myself an entrepreneur? A chartered accountant who has just started his CA firm, is he or she an entrepreneur?
No,
Why not? Why he is not an entrepreneur and Bhavish Patel of Ola is an entrepreneur? Okay, let's move to the next word. At least we could understand that we don't understand much about it, right? And that's true with me as well. Huh? The word startup. What do you mean by startup? Is it just a fancy word which people started using, or does it have any differentiating meaning which is other than a business setup or a company or a corporation? What is a startup, and how is it different from any other company? Let's say I'm sure you might have heard the words like MSME, right? MSME, micro, small, and medium enterprises, right? We have LLPs, we have private limited companies, we have public limited companies, we have societies, we have trusts, we have limited liability for partnership firms. Why do we have to coin a different word called startup? Were these words not sufficient? Any response? Anything, it could be anything. The earlier response was pretty close, huh, by the way. So don't other people should not think that it was wrong. She was right, more or less.
So actually, startup is an organization dedicated to create something new under conditions of extreme uncertainty.
Yeah, not bad. Not a bad. On the kind of perception we have about the word startup. Okay, let's move to the next word. What do you mean by word innovation? You hear this word left, right, and center, right? It's an era of innovation. Our ex-president Dr. 20 that became an era of innovation for India. Innovation in this field, innovation in that field. We all hear this word, right? Please say yes to all of you. Heard about it, read about it. It's not a new word to you, right?
Yes, sir.
So
Any idea
basically,
what is
it's the
innovation?
introduction to something new.
Okay. What is that something?
Uh,
Something
that
new.
could be
I mean,
that could be an
I
idea.
can dance in a new way. Is it an innovation?
Sir, it could be any idea, method, or device.
Hmm. Okay. Not bad. Not bad. One more. One more.
Innovation means like turning an idea into a solution.
Oh wow! Wonderful. Wonderful. That's great. That's great. That's perfect. I would say. Let's go to the next word. I will also talk about it as to what do I understand out of these words. Okay, and then we will build upon these words to understand what is entrepreneurship. What is technology? Just one response we will take and then we'll move forward. And I think the people who have not spoken so far should make an attempt. I can see about like 6 people whose name I can see here on screen, and it says that 49 others are there. May I request one of them from those 49 others give it a try? Simple technology. I'm not asking anything.
Sir, knowledge which we use in a practical way to solve any problem.
Wow, I think people are using Google. Huh? Tell me honestly.
That's true. That's true. Yes. The first line you see in the Google is
Because
this.
suddenly the responses are bang on. You know? This response, the earlier one. But I mean, as long as we all think the same way, we all are on the same page, whether through Google or whatever, anything else. The idea is to understand these words out of the meaning they carry, so that it will be easier for you to use them if at all you are interested in entrepreneurship. Okay, next. Intellectual property rights. I'm sure all of you have become experts out of the first talk, so I don't have to deal with it. Next, investment. What is investment? What is investor? Who is an investor? What is investment? Have you heard these words called capex and opex? Okay, let me ask one by one.
No, sir.
Okay, forget about capex and opex. Have you heard the word investment?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
What do you understand by investment? I understand that you people are from the science background, but you know, this is an era wherein the science is getting married with commerce. So all of you will have to understand these words. There is no
When we
doubt.
when we invest money
When we
in something, when we invest money,
invest money, okay, and if we are not investing money, is it an investment or not?
I think Garima put an answer.
Oh, people are writing in the chat box also. I'm not following.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, they put like a couple of answers there.
Oh, okay.
Actually,
Investor,
sir,
investor is the person who gives money to build up a company. Investment is putting money to build up a company. Great, Garima, you are bang on. But if you are using Google, don't use it. I want to hear your
No, no.
thoughts.
I think
Oh, this is good. This is good.
it,
Somebody was trying to, yeah, please
yeah, I
continue.
was saying like an investment is almost the profit-oriented practice, which involves putting the funds into the venture, aiming at getting the profit, something like that.
Okay, so I would say both Garima's and your response cover about like 10% of the, the overall response, which defines the word or the concept of investment and the investor. Okay, next.
I think so. Investor is someone who sees potential in something from which he can generate money or in future.
Yeah, not bad, not bad. The only thing is, I mean, if you can just de-link the investment with the money, because money is a
Not in
tool
terms.
through which you make the investment, but there are other resources
Yes,
also which
sir.
you can
Yes.
invest.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, yeah, okay, fine. Uh, has any one of you heard or read the word incubators or accelerators?
Yes, sir. Sir,
Okay.
incubators we use in the labs also.
No, I'm not talking about that incubator. I'm talking about the business incubator. Have you heard something called technology business incubator or business incubator?
So any unit that supports or assists startups to build their business.
Wonderful, wonderful. Next, have you heard this word unicorns?
No, sir.
Hmm,
Sorry.
you have heard it just 5 minutes
No, sir.
back from me. In the first slide, I used the word unicorns. You have not heard?
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. Next, have you heard this term called mergers and acquisition or M&As? Have you ever heard this word called merger of two companies or acquisition of a company by another company?
Yes, sir.
Big basket, you might have heard, right? Big basket, you know, right?
Yes, sir.
Big basket recently has been acquired by whom? Okay, Air India has recently been acquired by whom? Air India. Guys, the second one you should answer.
technically they should be.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with science or MBA. It's just these are just things happening around us. Big basket, many of you use, right?
Not common here in northern part. Could be common in Bangalore and south, somewhere in south. It's not that common.
I understand. But at least you might have heard about Big basket, especially
Definitely.
in the lockdown scenario when there was lockdown. No? Okay. Big basket is acquired by Tata's. Air India is acquired by Tata. So that when we say acquired, that this is the acquisition we are talking about. The other concept is merger. Okay, next.
Excuse me, sir. I
Yeah,
have
yeah.
a question. Actually, sir, we use Sigma Arbitrage for audit, and from last few years, I am using Merck also. So it's a
Right.
merger or acquisition. That I don't know.
I think the Merck has acquired Sigma. I'll tell you about what's the difference in merger and acquisition. IPO has has anybody heard about the blockbuster IPO of Zomato recently happened? Nobody has invested in it.
Yes, sir. I missed something.
Last one.
Okay, have you invested in Zomato?
सर क्या कॉस्ट पड़ी
No,
आपको
sir,
बताओ
not in Zomato, but
हाँ
recently Ruchi,
हेलो
in Ruchi. It's a review, but
Okay. Anybody else know this word IPO? Okay, no problem.